In 1386, a crowd gathered in a French town square to watch a murderer be executed. The prisoner arrived dressed in a waistcoat, gloves, and a human mask. The prisoner was a pig. And this wasn't some bizarre one-time event. It was a real trial with real lawyers, a real judge, and a verdict everyone in that courtroom took completely seriously. Welcome back to the channel. If you love uncovering the strangest, most unbelievable true stories history has to offer, hit subscribe now, because today's story is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about medieval justice. In January of 1386, in the Norman town of Falaise, a young pig attacked a baby left alone in its crib. The infant died from the injuries. The pig was arrested, not put down quietly by its owner. Arrested, the same word used for a human suspect, and thrown into the town prison to await trial. This wasn't unusual for the time. Records show pigs were the most commonly prosecuted animals in medieval Europe, mainly because they were allowed to roam freely through town streets, and there were simply a lot of them. Historians have documented well over 200 formal animal trials across France, Switzerland, Germany, and Italy between the 13th and 18th centuries. But the Falaise case became one of the most famous because someone did something medieval record keepers rarely did. They wrote almost every detail down. Here's what makes this genuinely fascinating, rather than just absurd. This pig received an actual legal defense. Medieval animal trials followed the same procedures as human trials. Witnesses were called and questioned. A prosecutor argued the case. In many instances, the animal was formally assigned a defense lawyer, sometimes a well-respected one. Judges consulted local legal customs before issuing a verdict. Court officials, counselors, and professional executioners treated the case with the same seriousness they'd give any human murder trial. This wasn't a mock proceeding for public entertainment. On paper, it was indistinguishable from a real homicide case. So why put an animal through an entire legal process at all? Because medieval legal theory held that animals existed within God's created order, meaning, in a strange but internally consistent way, they were considered capable of violating that order and therefore accountable to it. The Falaise pig was found guilty. Her sentence: to be maimed in the head and forelegs, then publicly hanged. On the day of the execution, the sow was dressed in human clothing, a waistcoat, gloves, even a mask resembling a human face, and led through town in a procession, much like a human criminal would have been. Town financial records even survive showing the exact cost of the spectacle. Several coins paid to the executioner, including for a brand new pair of gloves bought specifically for the occasion. The event was considered significant enough that a fresco depicting the execution was painted on the wall of the local church, and it reportedly remained there for over 400 years until it was accidentally destroyed by a workman in the 1800s. If you think Falaise was a one-off, it wasn't even close. In 1457, in the town of Savigny, a sow and her 6 piglets were put on trial together after a 5-year-old boy was found dead beside them. The court found the mother guilty and sentenced her to be hanged by her hind legs from a tree. The piglets, however, were acquitted. The court ruled there wasn't enough evidence to prove they had actually participated in the attack, and it wasn't only pigs. In 1474, a court in Switzerland famously put a rooster on trial for the crime of, quote, laying an egg, considered at the time an unnatural, almost demonic act. The rooster was sentenced to be burned at the stake. Insects and rodents faced trials too, though usually in church courts rather than secular ones, accused of destroying crops, and in a few recorded cases, formally summoned to appear, then simply didn't show up. Here's what modern historians believe was actually going on beneath the surface. A pig killing a child represented something deeply unsettling to a medieval community, an inversion of the natural order. Humans were supposed to eat animals, not the other way around. a public trial and execution symbolically restored that order in front of the entire town. There was also a more practical, political layer. In several regions, the right to execute a criminal, and even the right to build a gallows, was considered a mark of a lord's authority. Historical records show one case where a pig sat in jail for 5 years, while its owner formally petitioned a duke for permission to build gallows specifically to execute it. Think about that. Keeping a pig fed and imprisoned for half a decade, just to make a political point about who held legal power in that region. The animal, in a strange way, almost stopped being the point at all. So, if courts once put pigs on trial with real lawyers and real verdicts, what does that tell you about how differently people once understood justice and blame? If stories like this fascinate you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. This channel is full of history's strangest, most unbelievable true stories, and I don't want you to miss the next one.